From CGTN headquarters in Beijing, this is The Hub with Wang Guan.
Hello and welcome to The Hub on CGTN. I'm Wang Guan in Beijing. Today we turn our attention to Syria, where the dramatic fall of Damascus marks a pivotal moment in the country's history. Mr. Bashar al-Assad and his family are reportedly in Russia, a piece of information confirmed by the Kremlin, following a swift and decisive offensive that has brought Abu Mohammad al-Jolani, leader of the opposition HTS, into the capital. The implications are profound. Will this shift in power plunge Syria deeper into chaos and violence? Could this upheaval trigger a domino effect, destabilizing an already fragile region as foreign and regional powers vie for influence? And critically, how does China perceive all this? To make sense of the situation with events rapidly unfolding as we speak, I'm pleased to be joined in Beijing by He Wenping, Professor and Research Program Director at the Institute of West Asia and African Studies at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. In Xi'an, we have Wang Jin, Director of the Center for Israel Studies at Northwest University. Excuse me. And in Singapore, by James M. Dorsey, Adjunct Senior Fellow at Singapore's Jaratnam School of International Studies. Welcome, folks. Professor He, let me turn to you. It was remarkably quick that the news of Assad's fall came to us and to our audience around the world. What do you think triggered the sudden collapse of Assad's government? Was it internal betrayal, battlefield losses, or erosion of external support, such as those from Iran and Russia?
I think it's a combination, both internal factors and also, the external factors. You see, the first and foremost, I think, is this security vacuum now existing in Syria, because we all know in the past, in the previous those 10 years, more than 10 years civil war in Syria, and then given the very strong support coming from Russia, Iran, and also this Hezbollah from Lebanon, and then that's why Syria government led by the Mr. Assad can hold on, and then even we are thinking, wow, they are coming to the new era called the post-conflict reconstruction. So, but all of a sudden, now we see only given 12 days and all collapse. So that's why, that is because Russia, all those supporting those military means now is in Ukraine. They have been held on there. That is the main fighting front, by Russian government. They cannot lose, especially given this very critical, we are seeing this window times, because the new government White House will move in, led by Donald Trump, and now the outgoing President Biden, now obviously he has no this kind of energy or like enthusiasm to do anything new fighting front. So that's why now I think those opposition, those military forces, of course, they're backed by like a Turkey or whatever. So they find this a golden chance for them make this move, because Iran also being, you see, very much. The influence has been lowered down, given all those recent 1 year Israel, Hamas, this war we have seen Israel has been doing a lot of things, like damage greatly to Hamas, and then also Hezbollah of the Lebanon, and also Iran. Iran also lost a lot of like military high-level generals. So now you see even those counter-revenge between Iran and Israel also hasn't brought anything like positive for Iranian side. So actually they also now lose their military power to continue support the Syria government like they used to be. So all of this, when you see those front like Aleppo, like Homa, all those cities lose to the opposition hands in such a quick way, and then we can see there's short of those defense those forces, like from Russia, like even from like Iran or Hezbollah. And internally, you see those military, the army, Syria government army, all even take off their uniform. They are, no interesting to fight. And know those wow, we fight to the death. Wow, never seen. They quickly withdraw, even dismiss, take off their uniform. Why is that? Because of course, those military, they don't want to fight to the death for the government, because they even not been paid for a long, long time. You see the economic situation in Syria, I think that's an internal, internal factor, because people not, army soldier not being paid, and then they will not fight to death for the government, and plus like corruption also has been heard. Even those limited resources has been, putting some...
A very high youth unemployment, inflation,
Yes.
it's 50% more expensive to buy a chicken, to buy beef,
Right.
to buy vegetables on the streets of Damascus.
Yeah, right. So people actually suffering from those economic, this bad situation. So that even those military like building, this input now also being lowered down. So all this put together, internal and external, plus we see Syria government led by Mr. Assad. He also lost those alert by like, wow, maybe he's in danger, because all those high alert that was existing in the previous like 11 years when Syria was in civil war. But now, because in the year 2020, Russia and Turkey and has signed agreement. See, now we reach agreement. Okay, no longer fighting there, especially in the west and north, those places. Turkey has a very strong presence. So, seems for perspective of the Syria government led by Assad, he thought now everything is okay. So that's why even this compulsory military service, those system has been restored. No longer saying compulsory military service is changed to voluntary. So you can see loosed those alert from Syria side. But you see, on the contrary, those opposition, those military forces, they're all the time training and then get more those military weapon support. And even we see now, compare with like 10 years ago, now the opposition, those military forces, all dressed in very good uniform, those uniform, military uniform, and with very good weapon, military weapon support, even the technical know-how, fighting technical, all being, much more advanced compared with like 10 years ago. So you see one side is losing those alert, even saying everything is okay. They have been guaranteed by those agreement, whatever. And then another side, now they're all time doing this training and then prepare to catch those opportunities.
Yeah, I'm reminded of the war of Sun Tzu, Sun Tzu being fought, the war of Sun Tzu, assault the enemies when they're least prepared.
Yeah.
James, let me turn to you. Were there signals that we missed out earlier about Assad's weakening grip on power?
I think that presumably people on the ground must have known. To be fair, I think even the rebels were taken by surprise by the degree of brittleness of the Syrian military forces. And from a Russian and Iranian perspective, if the regime itself cannot in any form or fashion defend itself, if its own national military falls apart at the moment of an offensive, then there's not much Iranians or Russians can do unless they were going to be willing to literally occupy the country and take it over and hand it back to Assad. So this was a lost cause from the beginning. I think that's something that the rebels recognized from early on. Their initial plan was not conquering Damascus. Long term, yes, but not short term. Their initial plan was looking at advances in the north, taking advantage of the preoccupation of the Iranians and the Russians elsewhere. And when they realized in Aleppo that the military was that brittle, that's when I think the decision was taken to move forward and go for the capital.
Now in charge of the capital, the de facto authority, before they are challenged, or before a future factional fightings take place, is the gentleman by the name of Abu Mohammad al-Jolani and his group HTS. What do we know about this man and the group that is leading? Are they cohesive enough, you think, to consolidate power, or could fractures emerge within the ranks going forward? James.
Well, the group itself is cohesive, let's be clear. Abu Mohammad al-Jolani is his antecedents are as an al-Qaeda operative, as a Islamic State operative. There's a $10 million US bounty on his head. So with other words, his antecedents are jihadist. Fact of the matter is that over the last 8 or 9 years, he has moved away from jihadism. In fact, what he has done is turned the initial stronghold of Hayat Tahrir, al-Sham, his group, which is the largest rebel group, he has turned their stronghold in Idlib from the poorest region of Syria to the fastest growing region. You've got zoos, you've got residential compounds, you've got 24-hour electricity, something you don't have in Damascus. You've got a university, gender segregated, given with 18,000 students, and so on and so forth. Now, he's also an autocrat. The political system that he's introduced in Idlib is by no ways a Jeffersonian democracy. Where does that leave us for Damascus? Governing Idlib is one thing. Governing a country, a war-ravaged, war-destroyed company like Syria is a different ball. And he will need to be tested on that. There are many, for partly genuine reasons, partly for ideological reasons, who will say once a jihadist, always a jihadist, and therefore will not give al-Jolani any benefit of the doubt. He's going to have to prove that he has changed, and he is going to have to prove that he is going to introduce an inclusive or more permissive society than he would do, or as he would do under Islamic law. And the last thing I'll say is it's not so much that there may be differences within his own group, as much as you have an array of rebel groups with different agendas, different ideologies, and it's going to be the ability to maintain a balance of power that does not erupt into violence and chaos between them.
Director Wang Jin, let's talk about the internal dynamics in Syria right now playing out. There are so many factions at play. We have HTS, of course, and also the Turkey-backed Syrian National Army. We also have groups such as the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces. What do the internal power dynamics look like right now in Syria?
Although that we hope that the internal factions relation could go back to peace after the very brutal war just ended, but I don't think, I mean, let's be frank, I don't think that the future prospect inside Syria, particularly over the relations between different factions, will be very positive, given that on the one hand, as just James mentioned, that to govern Idlib is one thing, to govern the whole country is another thing, and the very quick and total victory within a very short term actually surprised everybody, including the rebel forces and rebel factions. So they do not have the very overall and united political landscape or political plan to govern and to tell the people how they will do and what they will do next, and how to unite everybody in this country, particularly melt down the divisions between different factions. And also we have to know that the faction divisions, particularly between SCN and HTS, is very salient. As meanwhile, the divisions and particularly the hostilities between the Syrian rebel forces and the Syrian Kurds are still very apparent and salient. So that is why I think in the future, maybe first of all, the internal conflict might erupt very quickly between the Syrian Kurdish people and the Turkey-backed Syrian rebels. And on the other hand, the relations inside the Syrian rebels is another big problem. So maybe that we hope that the peace could come back as early as possible and the country could go back to stability. But I am, let's be frank, I am not very positive about the relations inside the Syria. So that is a very major problem that they face.
So you're not optimistic about these groups collaborating to create a new political framework of sorts, a coalition government of sort, of course, with the help of international monitors for Syria, or you think we're more likely to see infighting and competition continuing in the foreseeable future in Syria?
Yes, exactly. Although, as you mentioned, there might be some assistance from international community, there some kind of assistance and mediation from Turkey, maybe particularly the Western countries. But given that we're talking about not the very unified, coherent rebel forces, we're talking about the kind of a combination and the collaboration between different factions of the rebel forces. And even in the SCN, even in the HTS, they have different subdivisions and sub-factions. And these sub-factions, their divisions are also very clear and also very strong. So that is why I hope that, let's say that I hope that that they could unite a very strong government with a coherent, clear political landscape and political principles. But I don't think that this is an easy task, because that everything just changed so quickly.
Yeah, let me ask you, Professor He Wenping. Of course, thank you, Wang Jing, for your insights. Truly insightful. Professor He, are there signs that Assad loyalists might try to regroup and stage a counteroffensive?
Oh, I think these chances, I think, is very limited. Because, Ho the family and also Mr. Assad himself, at the very beginning, even saying no news about him, maybe back, if he, let's do this analysis, if he choose not, outside of Syria, now in Moscow, in Russia, if he choose go back to his hometown, Alawi, those tribe, that's a stronghold for his family rule since his father's time. So maybe that means he still want to have another fight. Yeah. Regroup his supporter, regroup those, loyalty, even military, those soldiers. But now this is not his choice. You see, he's not saying, flew out back to his stronghold and then do the final fight. Actually, according to some information, saying even previous years, because his wife now has been suffering the cancer, saying he even want to quit by himself. Even previous years ago. So now, given those very strong attack from opposition, those forces, and then you see his reaction. The first choice is immediately leaving the country behind him, and then bring his wife, and then to get those safety guarantee from the Russia. So which means he quick. And then quit the job. He also make an announcement saying now no longer serving as the president of the Syria, and then give up. And even his prime minister stay in Syria, and even quickly make an announcement saying now we are willing to cooperate with all those anti-government opposition those forces as long as we have been peaceful, bring peace to the capital city, to the people there. So you see, very fast. No single hesitation, not saying wait for 1 day or 2 days or 1 week. So it's a quick surrender. So that means there's no chance for him saying to come back.
Yeah, Professor He, let me ask you about the control of other cities. A lot is at stake with Syria. That's a big country that is surrounded by major powers, of course. With HTS controlling Damascus, who holds sway over other key areas such as Aleppo, Homs, and Idlib? Please go ahead.
Yeah, I think now, as just Mr. Wang Yi said, now in Syria, the given future is very likely we'll have a civil conflict, exactly like Libya, when Colonel Gaddafi has been killed, and then you see all those military forces backed with even some come from different outside supporters. Now they have internal fighting. Those fighting given many, many years, even until now. In Libya, there's a Western government and the based Eastern and also the government mutually not recognize each other. So you see, fell into the civil war. So when you look about Syria, the situation also, it's not just the one HTS. So many other, like from south, west, and then those before they're all anti-government, seems united together. This is the same goal, exactly like Libya. They're all united, saying Gaddafi, Colonel Gaddafi should, gone. Now when this goal has been realized, and then they have their own trying to get this position, that position, get this power, so they cannot reach consensus in that easy way. Plus, all different military, those forces have different those outside supporters. Like U.S. also supported different those anti-Assad, those opposition forces before. So it's backed by U.S. And then Turkey also backed several. Yeah. So of course, Turkey government, Erdogan, has its own long-standing those those goals. They want to have a military buffer zone. Northwest of Syria, that's the way they want to cut those links with Turkey, at home, that Kurds are those, the party. So the Kurdish one there. And then in Syria, they also have Kurdish military forces. Before, they supported by U.S., but later on, U.S. also dropped the support to them because once this anti-ISIS, this mission has been done, so U.S. also dropped these Kurdish military forces. You see, Kurdish military forces, they are not team up together with this HTS at all. They have different mission. They have different support forces behind. So that's why we will not see saying, oh, quickly this HTS, because they captured Aleppo and also the Damascus, and then there will be the final ruler in this Syria, all other fractions, those military saying, oh, we loyalty to you. It's not that easy at all.
Yeah. I want to move on to international implications. There's certainly sphere of influence. James, hold on there. I'll turn to you later. But Dr. Wang Jin, let me turn to you first, because you recently spoke about this sphere of influence theory involving Turkey, Iran, and other actors, Russia and the United States. How do these external backers influence the internal dynamics among the different groups right now in Syria?
I think that's first of all determined by their own attitudes and their own assessments over the situation inside Syria. Because if we're looking back about maybe 10 years ago, Syria is a very center for the geopolitical competition and rivalry. So that is why Russia has their some kind of this supporting aim. They supported the Bashar al-Assad government, and Iran supported Bashar al-Assad government, hoping to maintain and establish the channel connecting Shia, Iran, Iraq, and also the connecting the Shia Lebanese Hezbollah. So that is why actually they hope that the government could be maintained and protected. And meanwhile, Turkey supported the rebel forces together with some of the Western countries, because they want to protect the so-called Turkish minority in the northern Syria, and also they want to establish kind of a buffer zone to separate the Syrian Kurds, with the Turkish Kurds. So that is why everybody has their own different concerns. But actually, I think the problem is that the time changed. Because during the past, 4 or 3 years, some of the regional major powers and the global power, they try to sit down to try to negotiate with each other without the very direct competition and the conflict. So that is why they do not want the very high profile competition and rivalry in this region. They just want to become kind of just a relatively safe scenario inside Syria. So after the transformation of the political power, maybe some of the countries they still have the concerns, but they want to hold dialogue with the new governments led by the different factions of the rebel forces, and also they want peace and stability, that their interests and concerns could be protected. So that is why I think maybe there were still competitions, but the things has been totally transformed. Wang Guan.
Okay, James, let's talk about the United States. The United States struck more than 75 ISIS targets inside Syria following Assad's fall. Is this purely a counter-terrorism act, as the Biden administration claimed, or is Washington using this moment to reassert itself, in this power fight, power politics in the region?
Well, first of all, I think we've got to be clear. The U.S. presence in Syria and U.S. operations in Syria really have been fairly limited. They have been largely directed towards the Islamic State, and the ground troops were the Syrian Democratic Forces, a predominantly Kurdish force. I think what you're seeing now is that the Americans are concerned about a repetition of the situation that you had in Afghanistan when the United States withdrew in 2021. You saw the emergence of the Taliban government being challenged by the Islamic State. And whatever the United States may think of al-Jolani and others, it doesn't want to see that happen in Syria. There are some grounds for the U.S. position, which are that the Islamic State attacks in Syria in 2023 and 2024 have doubled in number. So there has been a greater activity and reason for concern. Now, there are two variables in this. One is that obviously we're getting a new U.S. administration under Donald Trump, who has tweeted, Syria is not our problem, it's not our...
Syria is not our fight.
Yeah, but I think he will come to realize very quickly that he will need a stable Syria if he wants to pursue other U.S. policies, whether that's some form of Israeli-Palestinian peace, broader Arab recognition of Israel, particularly by Saudi Arabia, or Iran. So we'll have to see how that works out. There's also a second aspect here, and I want to come back to what my colleague said, is that the relationship between Hayat Tahrir, al-Sham, al-Jolani, the major rebel group, and Turkey is a very fragile relationship. Turkey initially in October stopped the offensive when the group originally planned it, tacitly went along with it 2 weeks ago. But whatever government comes to office in Damascus, whether that's Jolani or some other form of governance, it will have to be seen to restoring Syrian sovereignty over all of Syrian territory. And that is, of course, on the one hand, the Golan Heights occupied by Israel since 1967, but it's also the Turkish buffer zone in northern Turkey and the Turkish military presence on Syrian military grounds. And HTS and Turkey may differ on what form of governance and who will be the governors of Kurdish regions going forward in the future.
Yeah, James, let me ask you this. You're alluding to a scenario whereby Trump is not going to be totally hands-off when it comes to Syria. I mean, I partially agree. I mean, I still remember 2018, April, when under Trump, the U.S. Military launched this military operation against Syrian targets. Actually, that was the Chinese-American summit taking place over there. So what would be Trump's approach towards Syria, in your opinion?
I think one of the interesting facts about the lineup that Trump has for his new administration is it's very cohesive, with one exception, and that exception is his Middle East team. There are built-in differences in the nominations that he's made between his Middle East envoys, Stephen Wickoff on the one hand, a stark Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu supporter, and Boulos, the father-in-law of one of his daughters. They have very different visions of the Middle East. And then you have different visions with regard to Syria, with on the one hand Tulsi Gabbard as Director of National Intelligence, who has been empathetic towards Assad and pro-Syrian, and now is going to have to revise her views, and others who are very starkly anti-Syrian or anti-Assad. What I think we're going to see in terms of policy, Trump will want to expand the recognition of Israel by Arab states, but he will want to see Saudi Arabia recognize Israel, and that's going to take engineering an Israeli-Palestinian deal of some sort. And on the other hand, I think you're going to see a stepping up of the maximum pressure campaign against Iran. This is an administration populated by Iran hawks. But Trump has, I would argue, delusional views of his own negotiating skills. And he may very well see the maximum pressure campaign, the weakening of Iran in Syria, as an opportunity to negotiate a nuclear deal, or a deal that even goes beyond the nuclear, involves ballistic missiles and Iran, what's left of Iran's non-state allies.
All right, James, Wenping and Wang Jing, thank you also very much for digesting all this information for us. Thank you very much. Much appreciated. And thank you for watching this episode of The Hub on CGTN. I'm Wang Guan in Beijing. I'll see you again soon.